Welcome to the Psychedelic Couch. Before we dive into today's discussion, we remind our listeners that using illicit drugs carries significant risks and legal consequences. Psychedelic substances like LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, MDMA and DMT are illegal in many countries, including the UK, and their possession or use can lead to legal penalties. Psychedelics can have profound effects on mental and physical health. While some report positive experiences, others may face negative effects like anxiety and psychosis. These substances can also interact unpredictably with medications and underlying conditions. Approach psychedelics with caution and responsibility. This podcast shares information, not encouragement or advocacy for illegal use. If you or someone you know struggles with substance abuse, seek help from healthcare professionals or local support services. In today's episode, Will Williams delves into the transformative power of meditation. He emphasises the importance of adapting meditation practices to contemporary life, incorporating additional techniques to ensure they remain effective in today's fast-paced world. He stresses the need for grounding practices in the modern context, where people are constantly stimulated and distracted by screens and other external factors. He encourages listeners to engage in practices that promote self-awareness and healing, ultimately leading to a more balanced and fulfilling life. I really hope you enjoy today's episode. So you're down in Sussex?
Yes. Yeah, Chichester.
Nice. Doing a retreat down there?
Yeah. It's 10 days and we've brought a number of practitioners down to combine. We've just been doing fascia work and Pilates and Qigong. They're now doing a walking meditation in the garden, and then we're going to be teaching them about how to use energy, harness energy, tune into your intuition, all these sorts of things. And then sort of at the very beginning of the day and at the late afternoon, I'm teaching them some very advanced meditation stuff, which helps them just shed years and years of pain and trauma. So it works quite nicely.
Amazing. So they're practitioners, bodywork practitioners themselves.
Yeah, so one is a bodywork practitioner, one is, she's just an energy healer, really, but she's the best I've come across in Europe. And then I've got a holotropic breathwork lady coming tomorrow to run us through that. And we've got various gong baths and things going on as well. So it's a very full spectrum experience.
Amazing. Getting into the meditation piece, I mean, where did you start with all of this? Tell us a bit about your journey.
I was very far away from this particular life. When I was younger, I was really, really, really hardcore. I mean, yeah, wild didn't really come close to describing it. I remember reading a few books by the Dalai Lama at university and thinking, wow, that's cool. There was a part of me that felt drawn to it. But I remember in my mid-20s, I thought, I'm going to check that meditation thing out. And I went to some Buddhist sort of manor house outside of Slough. It felt very culty, and I just sort of drove up, saw all of these people in their robes and shaved heads, and just drove away again. I was like, this is just not me. And then over the next few years, I had the worst insomnia imaginable. It had been building and building through my 20s, and probably working in the music industry didn't help because I was just out partying every night, and that was my job. And I tried lots of things. Hypnotherapy, reflexology, yoga, colonic irrigation. My mates told me that was good for insomnia, but I think they were winding me up. I mean, just anything I could do, because when you are only sleeping 2 hours a night, you would literally do anything to rectify it. And I enjoyed most of them, but they didn't really change anything. And I'd just given up, and I was out partying in Shoreditch one night. And then I met this friend of a friend who I really enjoyed his company. We got talking. Somehow he mentioned the meditation that he'd recently learned, and turned out that 14 of his 15 best friends had learned it as well because it was so magnificent. And he said that several of them had been chronic insomniacs and it had fixed it. So I just said, right, one last roll of the dice. And honestly, if this hadn't have worked, I think I would have just gone forward in life accepting that it was going to be a very mediocre experience. But lo and behold, I tried it, and within 2 weeks my insomnia was gone, and then all of this other magical stuff started unfolding for me. And I just went on this amazing journey.
And that's how you developed Bija?
Yeah, so I learned in May 2008, and interestingly, 4 days after learning, a girl I'd been chasing for 8 years said, yes, let's do it, after completely stonewalling me for 8 years. So that was a nice little period of my life. And then because it was proving to be so revelatory, I mean, it wasn't just fixing my sleep, it was so much clarity. I was so much more efficient. I was one of those people, I'd draw up a list every day of the things I needed to do. I'd get about 60% of the way through by 8 o'clock in the evening, and then I'd just collapse. Now I was getting through 100% of my list by 6 p.m., and I was done for the evening. I'd have a meditation at the end of it. I'd feel totally chill, so much more present. I became much more creative. I started being able to pick up the phone and have difficult conversations with people that I'd always avoided. I then went on a retreat, and my girlfriend, when I came back, well, first of all, I had the most unbelievable experience of universal love. Yeah. That was way better than any of the drugs that I'd been taking all those years. And then when I came back, my girlfriend was like, "What's happened to you?" It's like everything you are perceiving in the world, you're seeing it through the eyes of a poet, and the way that you're talking about it. She was like, "I can't believe it." So then she came along and learned, and her anxiety levels dropped very quickly. She stopped snoring in the first 10 days, and she was a very, very loud snorer. She suddenly started being on time for things, which she was always famously terrible for. And she was just suddenly very organized. And we were both like, what is this thing? So we then decided to fly to India. We went around the world actually for 3 years, just learning all these different techniques, meeting all these different masters. And then at the end of it, I realized I need to teach it. So I did 4 months of training, and then combined it with all of the other things I picked up on the way. And that was what brought us Bija. And then it's been evolving over the last 12 years that I've been teaching. And funnily enough, actually, we've got someone here who I taught in 2015. And she came to a few retreats between 2015 and 2017. And she was like, "Wow, I can't believe how much this has developed since then." And she's loving it. So, yeah, you've always got to evolve, both individually and I think what you're bringing to the world.
Absolutely, absolutely, and collectively.
Yeah.
Tell us, how does it differ from other forms of meditation? People that aren't kind of fully aware of Bija. Just explain the differences between, I don't know, even mindfulness or other types of, transcendental meditation.
Sure. So the vast majority of meditation techniques in the world stem from monastic traditions. It's very much, they're designed to focus the mind, because actually when you're living the life of a monk, you're really, most of your day is spent just sort of being in a very relaxed state where you're communing with nature or these types of things. Is very much you're at peace. So your nervous system is not at all stimulated, but it means that the wiring in your brain can go a bit mushy if you don't actually bring concentration in. And for various historical reasons, in India, where it's due to the foreign invaders coming into India feeling very threatened by the householder techniques, i.e. the people in the towns and cities having access to high-level spiritual techniques that would make it difficult for them to be controlled. So that got wiped out. So the only thing that got left in India was all of those crazy monks in the mountains and the jungles. And they weren't really particularly concerned about that. But then fast forward 1,000 years or 2,000 years, and everyone's suddenly thinking that, oh yeah, if you want to connect with something that's bigger than this sort of more superficial material domain, you need to do what those monks do. And then all of those people living everyday lives are trying to do what the monks do, but the difference being that they're living busy lives they're using their brain all day. They're concentrating locked anyway. So then when they have to try and also concentrate in the meditation, the activation of the nervous system means that it's really, really difficult and quite self-defeating. And so what we're doing is harnessing some of those householder techniques that existed before the foreign invaders came 3,000 years ago. And what this is doing is, so I'm able to read people's energy super quickly, and I give someone a sound or a mantra that they then repeat within their mind. You don't speak it out loud because that's too surface level. The idea is that you want to work with that sound in the most super subtle way possible, so that it almost becomes like a quantum fluctuation in your mind. And if you've got the right sound for your particular disposition, nervous system, energy field, then what happens is that sound is going to draw you in to a deeper and deeper and deeper place until you are somewhere either transcendent or quasi-transcendent.
Mm.
When you're in that place, at the physiological level, you'll be in a hypermetabolic state. All of these amazing self-repair mechanisms that exist within you can start rebalancing and purging you of all the things that have been getting in the way of you being your best self. So it's about going to the very deepest essence of your being. And then the ripple effect is outwards and upwards. Whereas a lot of these techniques that are trying to clear the mind of all thoughts and use concentration and use intention, like strong intention, it's like they're taking a top-down approach. And what I've come to realize is that's a lot more challenging and a lot less enjoyable, and B, a lot less impactful.
Mm.
And of course, we're all so busy. If you're going to dedicate time to meditating every day, you want to be doing something that's giving you a lot of bang for your buck. So, it kind of makes sense to do something that A, harmonizes with our lifestyles in the 21st century, and B, that is going to give us the level of impact that we need to offset all of these very distortionary influences that we exist.
And I would love to check something out with you. So, an experience that I get when I'm using my mantra is that we'll almost feel in the concentration, like I can feel a buzzing. It's like the energy's rising and it feels like it's upward moving. This kind
Yeah,
of, yeah, tension is the right word. It's like building. And then at the end, when you have the 2 minutes, when you let go of the mantra, it is just like utter bliss because that's when the silence comes.
that is absolutely what you're wanting. And with this particular practice, obviously, if you're doing other practices, it might well be very different. And I'm always keen to implore people to follow the guidance of whoever they've been taught by, because there's different ways to climb the mountain. But yeah, this is very much the directionality of it is more in the upward direction, and you do get the energy moving up through the spinal column to the brain, I guess. And to be fair, the origins of our practice and the origins of transcendental meditation are the same. So it's called the Shankaracharya tradition of northern India. It's 10,000 years old. I think there's a few key differences there, that when that tradition was really at its peak, people were living in the mountains and it was a very simple way of life. And you almost didn't even need to think about having to sort of ground your energy down. So TM, which is what they're called, are still teaching it like that, but without any of any modifications to adapt to the modern way of living. Also, what we've been doing over the years is building in these other added extras, particularly at the beginning and the end of the meditation, to make sure that it just is very well rounded for the modern experience. Because although it's great to kind of go up and, as you say, reach that field of bliss, the other way to look at it actually is that your consciousness, which is very individualized when you're in the waking state and busy, is kind of flattening down and out into a more universal field of energy consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And when you merge with that sort of ocean of consciousness, what you experience is blissfulness, because that's what's there. It's much more when you're in your individualized state that you feel more of the pain and the tension and everything else that can, cloud over some of our experience. But if you're going to go in the one direction, you want to make sure, and if you're saying up and out and into the transcendent realm, you want to make sure that you're still grounded down. And because we're not living in the Himalayas anymore, because we're looking at these screens all day, which are actually, screens cause your energy to bounce out of your body. Just stress, stimulation, caffeine, Red Bull, all these things causing you to bounce out of your body. So you want to be practicing other techniques that just help bring you inside of your body, so you can be in your body but also simultaneously transcendent. And if you can do that, then the world is your oyster.
And so, how important is it for you and your students to have other embodied practices? I'm thinking about like the Kundalini I do, or other kind of yoga, or other embodied practices to help root that.
I think other embodiment practices are very valuable. We teach them, the further people go along in the journey, the more we teach those things to people precisely for those reasons. And we're doing it in ways that are kind of quite short and sweet and work in harmony with this. Kundalini practices, I mean, allegedly they're meant to be a lot of immanence involved, but I think it varies from school to school as to whether that actually ends up being achieved or whether people end up popping out of their bodies. So it's one of those where I think it depends on the particular teachers that you're working with, whether it has the desired effect or whether it has a bit more of a mixed effect. But yeah, either you learn those immanence techniques with us or you learn them elsewhere. I think it's all really, really good. And I don't think you have to be precious about trying to stick with one tradition. You just need to be perhaps a little bit wise about which ones are actually good as opposed to just fashionable
Yeah.
or that are. There's a lot of things that sort of pop up in the well-being space where, they dazzle for a few years and, lots of people are like, oh, wow, that's the thing to do. And yeah, I'm not always overly impressed with the quality of those things. Whereas a lot of if the ancient stuff is still kicking around, your Tai Chi and your Qigongs and these sorts of things, then there's likely to be quite a lot of relevance to that.
Uh,
And even just dance,
uh, uh,
really, really good way to get in your body and to move your body. Because that's the other thing to bear in mind. With a lot of these monastic techniques, they're very, very rigid. They're like a very masculine way to approach spirituality. Sit perfectly still, sit in perfect silence. That's a very, very masculine way to do it. And actually, we need that beautiful balance between the masculine and feminine. And so movement and flow is equally as important. So things like dance, particularly freeform dance, can be really wonderful. You can do like ecstatic dance, there's 5 rhythms, or you can do something like salsa. And certainly when I lived in Colombia for a year, it was amazing because it actually it forces you to open up your body and to be able to move your shoulders. And so many of us Westerners, we're rigid as hell. White men, of which I belong to that category, our hips and our shoulders are just frozen and there's just no groove, there's no flow there at all. We're just dad dancing our way through life and as well as not looking particularly hot on the dance floor, it's actually indicative of the fact that there are a lot of blockages there, physiological, that will actually then play out in the sort of mental domain and the emotional sphere and indeed the energetic one.
uh,
All of those domains kind of interact with one another. And so if you're doing dance, you're learning to move your body with flow, but you've also got some control, then that can be really good. Or maybe I'd encourage people to explore more flowy types of yoga as well. Ones that aren't so rigid and definitely not ones that are really hardcore. That's my personal view. If if your goal is balance, sometimes people are using things that could and potentially should be good for you, like exercise and yoga, anything kind of calisthenic, but they're doing it in such a hardcore way that not only do I question whether it's actually beneficial to them, I actually think it's detrimental to their long-term well-being, but they're addicted to the
endorphins.
endorphins that get released as a result of doing those things. And really, I think it's actually a form of avoidance. They're just, lots of people with anxiety, for example, they become really hardcore runners. And I feel like they're almost hiding from the problem rather than really addressing the roots of it. But anyway, that might be controversial to some of your listeners.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I was listening to what you're saying about the rigidity of a practice. And I'm mindful that one wants a meditation practice to have regularity and rhythm and, 2 practices a day, maybe in the morning, maybe in the evening. What about mixing practices? I'm just thinking there's lots of different types of meditation I've done over the years, and I have to admit sometimes I might feel like, God, I really feel like doing one of those Joe Dispenza ones, or I might do a bit of will stuff, and there's a sort of alchemy that goes on, but very much I guess connecting into what is it that I need in this moment. I mean, what are your thoughts, or do you think we do need to be quite pure and rigid in our practice?
Okay, well, that's a really interesting question. You've touched on a few things. I mean, if we're talking about it's I wouldn't say it's necessarily about purity. It most certainly doesn't want to ever be anything that becomes puritanical. And I think it's a really interesting thing to consider is the difference between purity and Puritanism. And we all know that the Puritanism is not a great way to go, and yet society always finds ways to, go down those blind alleys, whether it's moral Puritanism or whatever. The way that you're approaching it, if you are going to, let's call it pick and mix a little bit, then tuning in and really feeling what your deep essence is calling you to do is going to be the way to do it. On the flip side, in my experience, and I've probably taught about 10,000 people now, so you've got, there's a really good sample size to draw upon. There's a lot of people who are pick and mixing to actually avoid going deeply into something. And they just sort of want to stay more on the surface. And it's almost like they're doing it as a checkbox or as a story to tell themselves that they're trying, but they're actually scared of going really deeply into something. And at some level, it is probably worth mastering one tradition in your life if you are very keen to explore. But don't make that exclusive to everything else. I guess it's more like the 80-20 rule. Maybe 80% of your energy is dedicated to the one that feels like it's speaking to you most deeply. But make sure you keep room for the other 20% so that you can continue grazing broadly and find what works for you. Because one of the things that's uber important is the consistency of practice. So it's not about being puritanical. It's simply understanding how we are wired at the neurological level and even more subtle levels. If you want to neuroplastically develop your brain into the most powerful bit of kit you've got, and not just that, the wider nervous system, and with it, all of your organ systems and so on and so forth, right down to the cellular level, quite possibly subcellular. We don't know because we haven't necessarily measured that far, but pretty sure it does go subcellular. Then exposing yourself to a similar level of experience, and twice a day seems to work really well because you have two sub-rhythms within your daily circadian rhythm. Then what you're doing is you are helping your entire mind, body, and nervous system find new default settings that then become your set point. Because actually the way modern life is impacting us is dragging us so far away from what some might term as homeostasis that like life just is very difficult when nothing is really in balance. So that would be the argument for consistency of practice, because actually, Joe Dispenza, which he's become very popular, I've noticed in the last couple of years, that will be having one set of, it will be creating one set of dynamics physiologically, neurologically, and energetically. Whereas this practice will be creating a different set of dynamics. And it's totally fine to climb up the mountain from whichever place you want. But what you've got to be careful of is you don't start climbing the north face of, Everest or something, and then go, actually, I'm just going to scoot around to the east face now, and then I'm going to start climbing. Actually, now I'm going to go to the south face. It's a very laborious way of going about it. It would be interesting for sure to basically climb all four faces of Everest, but most mountain climbers would probably tell you, yeah, I'm not sure about that.
The way I've sort of seen it is you have your like it's like brushing your teeth. You have your twice daily practice, and then occasionally you'll go for a deep clean or go and see the
Yeah.
hygienist. So that's the way I've sort of.
No, and that is, I actually highly recommend that, for sure. Going away and doing an immersive experience, or even if you feel capable of managing your own immersive experience at home, crucially important, definitely. And, whether it's within your tradition or something that is a wild departure from that, as long as it's been structured by someone who has a relative level of mastery of the entirety of our being, then you're all good. Again, it's whether what's been put together is as holistically beneficial as they think it is. That's the only.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Food for thought. Could you tell us a bit more about the healing benefits? So, maybe thinking about the mental health benefits of meditation, of bija, the emotional well-being. I've got a particular interest, obviously, in the relational aspect, and I think there is huge benefit of meditating together if you're in a relationship or the kind of the relational connection that is built through that. So, yeah, I would just love to hear your thoughts and your wisdom and all of that. Maybe we'll start with the mental, medical, and then move on to the physical.
Yeah, so I guess let's start with the physical, because actually what I think, I mean, in recent years, people are starting to really recognize the mind-body connection, as it were. But for, until recently, most of Western medicine, they considered them to be completely separate things. And that's not cool at all. Just simply, for example, the more toxic your body, the more emotionally reactive you're going to be. Because every significant toxin within your body, and we have unbelievable amounts of it actually, because of all the chemicals in the air that we're breathing, they're distorting behavior, they're distorting how we feel. So, one very quick example, researchers became very interested in the 90s and early 2000s about why there were significant drop-offs in crime rates through the 90s. And it was the same profile of decline. So they thought there must be some common cause. Turned out it was the lead in the petrol. So prior to that, just putting lead in petrol coming out of exhaust pipes and then us breathing it in, and that lead getting into our brain and distorting, whether it's our brain chemistry or simply the activation of our brain, it was leading significant numbers of people to engage in criminal behavior. And as soon as within, let's say, 6 or 12 months of you taking the lead out of the petrol and people are breathing slightly cleaner air, all of a sudden those criminal tendencies dissipate. That's one heavy metal that is in the air, and yet there's dozens of heavy metals in the air that we're still breathing every day. There's loads of shit in the water supply. There's, hormone disruptors and obviously microplastics. And then you've got all the stuff that's in our food, all the pesticides and fertilizers and other agrochemicals that they're using to basically industrialize agriculture and increase yields, but with little thought to how that might be affecting humans over a long period of time, because most of our medical studies are very much short-term in nature. People aren't, or what are the long-term effects, and they're also not understanding what are the long-term effects of combining this set of inputs and this set of inputs. And once you start to realize how all of those things end up impacting us and how much of that is inside of our body, and some of which, glyphosate, which are on most people's plates every day because they get sprayed on the crops, they're getting through the blood-brain barrier and causing all sorts of mischief in the brain. And, they're apparently carcinogenic as well. But giving yourself, your body an opportunity to go into a hypometabolic state so that it can clear out the physical toxins, massive. Not just for your physical health, but for your mental health and your emotional health. Then you've got all of the snapshot memories in your nervous system from all the times in your life when you felt emotional or scared or stressed or whatever it is, traumatized. They're called samskaras in ancient India. That's where we get the English word scar from. And that literally they reckon we have, this is Western scientists reckon that we've got at least 100,000 of these scars in our nervous system by the age of 18. And so one of the things that happens if you can get yourself into your deepest possible state is your body just starts releasing all of the emotional charge associated with these past events. So you still kind of remember the event, but it's not activating your nervous system to be more defensive, more aggressive, or withdrawn. You can actually simply respond to the stimuli in life that is perfectly appropriate to the context of the situation.
And do you find, Will, that people, sorry to interrupt you, but do you find, because I find this naturally, but I wonder if this is because I'm an EMDR trauma therapist, that when you will be in meditation, you might connect to something or you might notice the feeling in your body, and people do float back and they will connect to that memory, or memories pop up for people that are, you know, that they've not experienced that before, and suddenly they've got really useful material that's coming up that they hadn't otherwise been aware of.
100%. And it's really interesting actually, because what you start to realize is, well, first of all, you have lots of realizations about things that you didn't even know were lurking within, because it was, in all likelihood, it was sufficiently painful that you buried it and you suppressed it. And some people are keeping desperately busy in life to avoid almost feeling what's there. You know, you can make yourself numb through busyness. And obviously, once you start doing all of this, you open yourself up, and then some of that stuff comes up and out. But the thing is, because you got this practice, you can handle whatever comes up and comes out. If it's done again, so another aspect with it is, if it's a subtle practice, A, you've got more chance of getting into the deepest realms, but B, it will unfold at a rate that is workable. If you're doing a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am practice, stuff can come up before you're ready to deal with it. And that can actually be even more traumatizing than the original trauma. And that's, you know, and unfortunately, there are some of these things out there, and you might go away for 10 days and, you know, people are ruined by the end of it because they just were not ready for that level of exposure.
So in IFS, Richard Schwartz sort of talks about this idea that we are made up of many, many, many parts. You know, there's different parts form at different stages of our lives. And often as kids, there will be parts that are shameful and not acceptable in our family of origin. So they become exiled parts, they get sent off, and we develop managers and protectors that step in to be able to keep us safe. So if you go too quick and too fast and too hard, those protectors are going to activate even more so, you know, and they send the firefighters in that are just like, no, we are not going there. So we have to be really careful, or we have to do the prep work to be able to get the support and the help of the protectors so that we can really gently start to bring those parts back in, you know, in a very contained way.
From your description, that sounds like a very, very useful and insightful model to work with, because it very much aligns with everything that I've seen and experienced. And as you become very, you know, when you've been doing all the practice that can be done, your level of insight and perception and the way that you're able to read what's going on in the individual and going on in the collective becomes ultra heightened, and you can see exactly those dynamics that you've just described. And it's about allowing things to be gently coaxed out of you. And also it's about, rather than trying to direct the attention and having a very sort of active ingredient mentality. But this morning, for example, we're working on the heart chakra. We've been doing one chakra a day today's the heart chakra day. And actually the first hour we didn't do one, every single thing that we were doing was in the lower body from the waist down, because actually you need to create the conditions whereby then when the heart does open in a much more powerful way, it feels like it can do so safely and won't then slam shut. You know, first sign of trouble or danger or whatever. So yeah, that's a very, very wise approach to take. And so going back to this idea of having these memories stored up, one of the things that happens in life is we start to create multiple memories to do with a particular person or a particular place. And we should actually probably call it an entire network of memories. What then happens is we start developing narratives individually about what's going on, and including about ourselves. Obviously, if mummy or daddy tell us that we're a bad boy or a bad girl, that is it. That becomes the narrative we have about ourselves, and then every bit of life information that comes to us gets filtered through that prism, and we end up just reinforcing these beliefs about ourselves. And then of course that, we might start engaging in self-harm or the more subtle aspects of self-destructive behavior, always sabotaging ourselves in every way possible. And obviously we may then start developing narratives about other groups of people as well. I think you do see this a lot between men and women, unfortunately, these days. If you look at social media, it's like people are carrying whatever wounds they've got towards possibly the other group, and then it seems that other people have got those wounds towards that other group, and hey, we all seem to have a shared understanding of what's going on here, and it's all their fault and blah blah blah. But actually, once you purge yourself of all of those pains and hurts, or maybe let's be a bit gentler on ourselves, once you purge yourself of 40, 50, 60% of those things, all of a sudden you've got enough bandwidth now to realize, oh yeah, actually there's just certain, there were certain events in my life that colored my view in that way, but that's not actually the underlying truth of myself or of that person or of the world and the universe. And once you get to that place, you feel so much more trust in yourself, and you feel trust in life and the universe. You can begin to trust other people. You don't feel like you need to have all of these mechanisms in place to keep yourself safe, micromanaging everything, like controlling behaviors, and, or feeling like you've got to stress yourself to death in order to accomplish everything you need to achieve so that you can feel good about yourself. Life becomes something that you feel a master of, as opposed to you feeling a slave to.
And I always, I'm sure you'd agree that kind of more time I spend on the matter in kind of a meditation space, the less effort that you need to put in the material world. You can cease being matter influencing matter, just like you started off at the beginning with your to-do list. Suddenly you have intention there, and shit just happens. And it happens in a way that you're not pushing, and you're not kind of coming at it from a really forceful perspective. There's, like you say, there's a trust, and it just unfolds, and you become less, I don't know, attached to the outcome, I guess, as well, that you can just be
100%. And I like the way that you phrased that last bit, which is less attached to the outcome, because it's not about being completely detached. There's no harm in having a preference. And again, I think, let's call it out. Within the Buddhist community, detachment is a really big thing. And it's like, yeah, if you're a monk, great. If you're a householder, you don't want to be detached from your children. What is going on there? So, and I'm not trying to knock Buddhism. I'm just saying that is only appropriate to some people. But being less attached is actually probably very beneficial to most people, because most people are very, very attached to things. And actually, one of the things they're very attached to is the things that they don't yet have in their life, because they feel a sense of lack. And they feel very attached to the storylines that really give them a sort of a hiding place. I guess you could call it a victim complex or whatever. And they're very attached to their victimhood, because by having that hiding place, then they don't actually have to do the work of growing, in an open environment, as it were. Sorry, can you remind me, before, what were you also talking about apart from attachment?
Well, before then, we were talking about, like, I wanted to sort of explore the mental health, emotional benefits. And we were going to talk a little bit about the physical first. And you're talking about the samskaras and the kind of trauma that's held within the system. So just thinking about, like, what are the physical benefits of meditation? And then we can move on to the emotional, kind of mental.
First of all, by having a more settled nervous system, you're going to find it much easier to get to sleep, and then you will have a much deeper, you will have much more deeper sleep during your 8 hours or however long it is. And that enables your mind, body, and nervous system to do all sorts of rest and repair functions that it wouldn't do if either A, you weren't sleeping, or B, you were sleeping, but because your nervous system is so active, it's very shallow sleep. That in and of itself is a game-changing shift in one's life. Then you wake up in the morning, let's say you do a meditation early doors. Now what you're doing is you're supercharging, you're building on that amazing foundation that your good sleep has provided you with, and you're supercharging yourself with more physical, mental, emotional energy to then go into your day so that you can adapt to all of the changing conditions, all of the changes in expectations, all of the demands that you will face during your working day, or obviously if you've got family life and young kids, they will present all sorts of challenges for you, so that you don't then just feel like you're running on empty the whole time, chasing your tail and just being a bit of a headless chicken, or just feeling exhausted the whole time. You can actually feel quite sparky. And I know what it was now. It's you don't feel like you are just grinding through life with effort. You can act, it feels like everything is flowing effortlessly. And that's why, the title of my book was purposely called The Effortless Mind, because I wanted to promote this idea that effortlessness is actually the most effective way to accomplish the most in life. And so at the physical level, it's going to be basically helping your internal alarm system, your amygdala, calm down, which means that all of your organ systems are not in fight or flight mode, working at a massive rate of knots. That's really good for your long-term health, cardiovascular, respiratory, because you're not pumping so many stress chemicals into your body. It means that instead of programming yourself to only breathe in the top third of your lungs, you're now using all of your lung capacity to breathe. So people's respiratory conditions go way down and they get much better oxygen carbon dioxide exchange, which again, I think we can all deduce that that's a really, really good thing. Massive improvements in your digestion. Thankfully, finally, even though Ayurveda has been saying it for 5,000 years, digestive health is critically important to not just your physical health, but your mental health and your emotional health. And, we've discovered this little thing called the microbiome. It's like, oh yeah, it's quite important. Bloody important. And might actually be the most important part of your health. But when we're stressed, what happens is our digestion becomes very inhibited. And a lot of the blood that would be directed towards our digestive tract actually goes elsewhere in the body. So you start meditating, and then all of a sudden your digestion starts to rebalance. And whether you've got something like IBS or IBD or, all of these different digestive issues that didn't seem to exist 50 years ago, but now everyone's got them, that becomes very moderate if it exists at all. But even for people who don't have those situations, you get a massive improvement in your digestion. That means you're extracting more and more of the nutrients, your minerals, your vitamins from the food that can then be metabolized into all of the cells within your body. And you've just got much better health at that level. From the immuno function point of view, chronic stress in your life, which pretty much everyone has these days, means that some of your immune system is just in overdrive. A lot more and more people getting autoimmune situations, but that also exhausts your body. So if you can damp down the level of unnecessary immuno overdrive, that's really valuable. But also, if you can make sure that you're not immunosuppressed by being more balanced, it means that when you do encounter these various things that would otherwise trigger you, you're okay. Like, your body just copes with it. Sexual health, massively improved. The more and more stress there is in the world, libido falls down, or we feel the need to gravitate towards ever more extreme forms of sexual stimulation in order to get us, to get the juices flowing. Reproductive health, male fertility is down 50% in the last 40 years. Female fertility even more so.
In response to two of the things you said there, the impact that when you're affecting kind of digestive system, the choice of food you then go for. I found definitely, my kind of reduction, if not actually no drinking of alcohol for the last few years, the change and the choice of diet. And then in terms of sort of sexual function, the type of sex that we're wanting to have.
It's true. Okay, so we'll start with the dietary stuff first of all. One of the things that your body wants when it's in constant stress, constant fight or flight, which is what everybody in the industrialized world has got, unless they're doing techniques to balance it. Because your body thinks that it's got all of these like life-threatening emergencies to deal with, even though actually it's just, having to deal with your in-laws or something. It wants you to onboard as much fat and sugar as possible to store in the fat cells so that you've got energy reserves there and ready so that you can run across the savannah or defeat whatever the predator is. We find ourselves just utterly captivated by junk food effectively. And we might find ourselves wanting to graze through the day and we're sort of staring into the fridge, what can we have? And we go to have one square of chocolate and then we've demolished the entire bar, or whatever it might be, one scoop of ice cream becomes an entire tub. And obviously, the nutritional content of these things is minimal to zero. And yet, we are massively drawn to these things. It's because we're in fight or flight, because we're just trying to onboard as much fat and sugar into our cells as possible. That obviously then leads to potentially obesity or various other things. But when you are able to do a practice which calms down your internal fight or flight mechanisms so that over time, they only actually pop when there is something really significant at play, what happens is all of that intelligence within your body is able to start telling you, oh yeah, actually, do you know what? We need lots of B12 today. Oh, go and have that thing, or I need this, or I need that. And you find yourself drawn to things that you might have always thought, oh no, I've never been into that. But actually, you're loving it. But then you go to, and I had this with so many things, but Brussels sprouts is kind of one of the ones that everyone can relate to, I think. I was in LA one time and I was in whatever that Soho house is in Malibu. The menu was gorgeous. Like rarely for me, I looked at every item on the menu and I was like, oh wow, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I couldn't take my eyes off the Brussels sprouts. I thought, what's that all about? I hate Brussels sprouts. My mum gave me Brussels sprouts when I was 5 and they were disgusting. I ordered them because I know to listen to my intuition. And my body went wild for them. And that next week, for some reason, there was a bit of a Brussels sprout craze in LA at the time. I had Brussels sprouts at every opportunity. I wolfed them down. I had 2 plates at that place in Malibu. But then all of a sudden, my body was like, oh no, I'm done now. Whatever nutrients were in the Brussels sprouts, I was topped up. And then I just went back to whatever I found myself naturally gravitating towards. So that's how that evolves. And this is why dieting is so brutal for people, because they're trying to force themselves, they're trying to resist their survival mechanisms. And your survival mechanism is so strong and powerful because it's there to literally save you so that you can, reproduce your DNA. That you trying to use your willpower to not have the things that it has, it becomes you actually have to really constrict yourself and block yourself. And that becomes very problematic because you then develop very unhealthy patterns within yourself. So the trick is to actually kind of hack your systems in a very subtle and gentle way to the point whereby your entire mind, body, and nervous system is gravitating towards things that are very holistically beneficial, where you are triggering all sorts of virtuous cycles in your life instead of the vicious cycles that all of those things do. Because obviously you smash through a tub of ice cream and you get the little spike high for a little bit, and then you feel really shit afterwards. And then the next day you feel really crap about yourself because, you just feel your body's a bit inflamed and you just feel a bit sort of fat and horrible and ugly maybe. And then you get home from work and it's like, oh, well, fuck you. Now that I've done it once, I might as well just have another tub of ice cream. And so these things do become very vicious. But if you can start triggering all the virtues, then you find yourself making natural, healthy choices. So, and then if you move all the way through to sexuality, as I said, when you're feeling quite numb, your preferences might be for more extreme things. When you're very much residing in your lower chakras, there's more of the sort of shadow element at play. And when you're more existing in your heart level and above, there is much more of a desire for something that is really loving, and there's a lot of depth there. There's a lot of connection. And what's lovely, because you're less numb, you feel so much more sensation throughout your body as well. So you don't need strong experiences to trigger all of your pleasure centers. Actually, quite often the subtle stuff kicks in. But what's also really nice is then if you do play with, something a little bit more kinky, if you're doing it from the heart level, then what happens is you're engaging in a lot of playfulness.
Mm-mm.
And one of the things that people don't recognize because of this very stern and severe spirituality that's existed for a long time, one of the primordial qualities of the universe is playfulness. And so you can play with these things that are a little bit more, well, what would be the word? Just interesting, maybe. But you're doing so from a place that's just full of love. However, when you go playing with those things, when you're in your lower chakras, and it's more kind of like ego driven, it's more driven by some of the wounds that you have, then you
Mm.
start going down dark alleyways, and yeah, you're just sort of reinforcing the shadow elements inside of yourself. And so there can be an awful lot of pleasure there, but really it almost has some of the hallmarks of the addictive tendencies that you might get towards other substances or behaviors. And ultimately, it's not going to be life affirming. It's not going to be your vibration. It's going to be bringing you down. It's quite, and sexuality is such an important part of life. And obviously, in our sort of post-Victorian age, we still have some of those Victorian sensibilities, and we're still a little bit shy about discussing some of these things. Much better in the last 10 years, but it's such an important part of the human experience and human health. But it can be emotionally challenging. And actually, there's all sorts of energetic dynamics which most people don't realize either, which it's worth paying attention to. Ultimately, being in a much greater state of balance will enable you to have a much healthier embrace of all things sexual. And of course, for lots of people out there as well, they have lots of inhibitions. Like you mentioned, shame and guilt. One of the things our society indoctrinates us with is shame and guilt and all of these things, whether it came from sort of religious origins, but you see parents doing it, guilting and shaming their children into trying to behave in ways that the parent approves of. So we can be carrying all sorts of baggage in and around our sexual centers. If you can clear that away, then all of a sudden you might find yourself being able to open up to intimacy in ways that you never even dreamed. And the level of depth that you can achieve through spiritual practices is unbelievable. And actually, there is a pathway to the divine experience through very powerful sexuality, and those can be taught and learned and practiced. And you can go to places sexually. I've had many experiences whereby through sexual congress with my partner, I'm able to literally, the statue of the Buddha is the like, or is it the thousand petals on the head?
Mm.
You can literally, you just feel all of these petals coming down from heaven. And you feel that it across your brain. Yeah, I mean, it just gets wild where you can go with it. But you can only really do that when you're really, really open. Because if you're blocked, then it becomes a sort of temporary climactic wonder with some, juicy hormones for a little while, and then it dissipates, and then you're sort of back to where you were.
Well, and I suppose thinking what it is that meditation does for us in terms of our erotic system, we become much more alive, right? When we can
Correct.
start to be alive, and just feeling the sensation of our skin and what it's like to have, I don't know, the wind in our hair, that experience of aliveness. When we can notice and be in our body in that way, we bring that then into our sexual experience. So we become much more in our system rather than, for lots of people, it's an external mechanism and maybe they're watching things to kind of get turned on rather than really being in their own system. And this emphasis, I often see clients, the emphasis on orgasm, whereas actually if we think rather that it's about, I sort of have this idea, with people that they're rushing to the top of the mountain. It's all about getting to the peak. It's as hard and fast as you can. But rather, what if we spend, a lifetime discovering all of the nooks and crannies on that mountain, walking and finding a field and spending your time just smelling a little buttercup. Whether or not we reach the summit is irrelevant. So we change our focus, and maybe we orgasm, maybe we don't, but that's not the focus on the process or the journey.
Well, and this is one of the things that happens when we feel an internal sense of lack, when we feel that we are not yet whole, we're always looking outside of ourselves for that thing that is going to complete us. And, we think, oh, I just need to meet the love of my life. Once I meet the love of my life, I'll be complete. And then you get together with them and you have 6 months of honeymoon period. And then all of those samskaras start activating. And before you know it, it's Kramer versus Kramer. And then you think, actually, what we need children. Children are going to make me whole. Or, one or both parties are thinking, oh, do you know what? I just need to get to this level in my career. And once I've reached there, I can plant my flag in the ground and I've got there, I got to the top of the mountain, then I'm going to feel fulfilled. And they don't. Or if I just have that house, or if I just have, that bank balance, or if I just have this, or just have that, or that level of academic qualification. And it never, ever, ever actually comes to them. And it's one of the reasons, I've taught loads of billionaires. It's quite shocking how many I have. And the reason I believe is that they climb to the top of the sort of monetary mountain, realize that they feel just as average as they did before they made money. And so they have to look somewhere else. And, I guess you bounce from materialism to spirituality, or actually quite a number of them end up becoming addicts because they're just lost in, they got there and it didn't deliver what they thought, so they might as well just numb themselves with substances. When you start engaging in all of this stuff, and you're doing stuff in a wise way and it's properly impactful, then you realize that actually your internal experience is the ultimate determiner of how you feel about life, and indeed your external experience. So when you're healing all of those wounds inside of yourself, what happens is when we've got these wounds that are just activating, they're literally like magnets drawing experiences to you. This is just the way the universe is set up. It draws experiences to you to help you realize that thing is going on, and for you to learn the lesson and to basically course correct and change the path. But of course, because we don't really have this understanding in everyday life, these things are coming at us, and instead of being an opportunity for us to learn something and evolve beyond it, it just starts reinforcing the pattern. And then we might become a victim to the fact that this thing is always happening. Why is it always me? And actually, it's you are attracting these things. But once you start healing them, then the magnetism is very much drawing positive things into your life. Yeah. And that's where the effortless approach can be really effective, because instead of you having to chase around life like some kind of sheepdog or something, just desperately trying to make life happen as you want it to happen, it's like you are just attracting life to you and good things to you. Yes, you will attract the odd challenge here or there, but that keeps you on your toes and that keeps you learning and growing and moving forward. But effectively, life comes to you rather than you having to go to it. And it's so much more satisfying. It's much less exhausting. And it's a much more powerful platform from which to live life.
And it's much more fun.
So much more fun. Genuinely fun. One of the things I really like about the ancient sages of India, it's known as the Vedic culture. In Sanskrit, there's 2 words for happiness. You've got sukha and you've got prayer. And basically, prayer is the spike highs of happiness. And that's something that we're all familiar with. Buy a new set of shoes and, I feel really good in those for a few days. And then, and then it dissipates. And, I guess Imelda Marcos had a lot of shoe-related prayer. But we all know that feeling that it never sustains itself. And yet, for some reason, that has become one of the pillars of the way that we roll through life. But then you've got this thing called sukha. And that is your baseline level of happiness. And that was the thing that the ancient sages of India were much more interested in growing and developing. Because if you can lift your baseline higher and higher and higher and higher, what happens is at some point, your sukha level, your sukha value is higher than actually the peak of your former prayer values. So you talked earlier about finding alcohol less and less interest. Well, number one, when we're feeling more internal pain, we might seek numbing agents to basically feeling numb is superior to feeling pain. But of course, once you eliminate or let's say significantly reduce the pain that you're feeling, emotional pain, physical pain, whatever, then actually numbing yourself is less fun or less fulfilling than your general day-to-day experience. But if you look at it as the difference between the sukha and the prayer values is before you getting pissed at the weekend, you get that spike high on the Friday night. Well, Saturday morning you'll be down there, but Friday night you're up here. And compared to your normal sukha value here, oh wow, so much better, so much fun. But if you keep doing your practices and get your sukha value up here, well, going out and getting pissed does nothing for you anymore. Maybe once in a blue moon it can be quite fun because there's a certain novelty value to it. So yeah, it's very interesting observing how the progression of your internal conditions changes you not only your relationship with yourself but with life, and the things that add value to your life definitely change for sure.
So, Will, someone who's new to meditation, what would you say are some of the challenges and how can they overcome those challenges? Because getting started can often be the hardest part, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Well, first of all, see if you can disabuse yourself of this idea that you need to clear the mind of all thoughts, or that you've got to try and experience, that you've got to try and be mindful, that you've got to try and be present. Personally, if you are a householder, if you enjoy relationships and careers and, going out and having fun and being kind of living a normal modern life, just understand that your nervous system is so wildly activated by all of the stimulation of modernity because it's like 40 times higher than it was 100 years ago, and our brains haven't adapted to it. So your brain is not going to be shut up. And no, I've taught 800 yoga teachers, and I'm sure they're always telling their students, clear the mind of all thoughts. And then, they're secretly telling me, I'm telling people to do it, but I can't even do it myself. And I'm like, well, if the yoga teacher can't clear their mind of all thoughts, what hope have all of the people in their class have got? But everybody's there in the class trying to do it. It's not working. And then they're feeling really frustrated by it. And they might actually be beating themselves up for being so crap at it. And it's like, yeah, everyone's like that. Everyone. And it's not your fault. It's not yoga's fault. It's just we're living a modern 21st century life. So let go of any expectation you have that you should be able to meditate without having thoughts, because as long as that program is running, you're in for a hard time. And yes, let go of the outcome orientation. For me, meditation brings you so much more value into your life if instead of you trying to make it an experience-led endeavor, you actually allow it to be a process-led endeavor. Treat it as a process that is going to help make the rest of your day and the rest of your life better when your eyes are open, and actually don't give a shit about what's going on when your eyes are closed, because what's going on when your eyes are closed, for most people, it's a lot of internal laundry, and you need to launder that out of your system. But laundry can be quite noisy. So you might get thoughts coming up, emotions coming up, everything else. But that's it. You're purging your system of it so that then when you're out there in the field of life, you're so much clearer of all of that stuff. So seeing meditation as a process rather than something that should give you some kind of wonderful experience that should be some kind of escape portal from life, no, I don't think that's going to help anyone. Now, what's interesting is as soon as you let go of any expectation, any desire for outcome, funny enough, you quite often then have these funky experiences, and you're seeing things, colors, shapes, geometric patterns, visions, memories from your past coming up, whatever it might be, all sorts of cognitive things coming up, amazing ideas for goodness knows what. And interestingly, we were talking about sexuality earlier. Sexuality and orgasm are clearly, there is an energetic component to them, and a significant one, because otherwise, how the hell is it that saying a little mantra can give you a mind-blowing orgasm? I don't know if you've experienced that, and I wouldn't necessarily expect you to share it on your podcast, but I've had many people over the years, they're like, what the hell just happened? I'm just meditating and I've just had the most almighty orgasm. And certainly when you're doing immersive experiences like we're doing here at the moment, you can get quite a lot of that. And all you're doing is saying a super subtle sound, and yet you are somehow having like some huge cosmic orgasm. And so there is so much that is possible within you if you let go of the desire to chase it, to try and control or manipulate the experience. If you're trying to get an orgasm in your meditation,
Forget
not
it.
never, ever going to happen. It's only when you are just unbelievably nonchalant and you're like, hey, it's cool, it's all a process. And ooh.
No, I've not had that in meditation, but in breath work. And it kind of comes by total surprise, right? You're like, what the hell was that?
Happy days.
Happy days. Will, any final thoughts or anything that I've not asked that you wish I'd asked?
That's interesting. Well, the first thing I'd say, just following on from your previous question, I would recommend people consider finding an actual teacher to work with, because a good teacher is able to spot little quirks about the way you are approaching things and help you make little tweaks that could actually make a game-changing difference to how much you get out of it. So that's something for people to consider. I would definitely promote the idea of, or encourage people to be very curious about what might be out there, what the possibilities are, and to the best of their capability, to suspend any and all disbelief about what is possible, and actually to genuinely do the research and see what happens. And it's interesting because the original Greek meaning of the word skeptic was simply having open-minded rigor. And it's good to be rigorous. You don't want to just, suddenly get drawn into some cult somewhere. Someone was telling me about something called the pathway of love or something. It's a new thing that's happening and I haven't come across my radar. Got no idea, so I can't comment. But, who knows? Might be a bit culty. And if you are just completely throw yourself in with reckless abandon, before you know it, you've changed your name, you've shaved your head, you're wearing robes, and basically you're abandoning everything in your life. And that wasn't necessarily your pathway. But so you want to be rigorous and make sure that, this is actually delivering what is speaking to me in my heart and my soul level. But you need to be open-minded, because actually, if you're so insistent that everything you know now is basically best, then you're saying that, or you are implying that the status quo is exactly what you're looking for in life. I don't think there's that many people who deep down are looking for the status quo. They actually want something extra. They want something beyond. They want to feel more alive, more connected to themselves, more of a sense of belonging, more love, more creativity, more vitality, more wisdom, and more. I think people are actually looking for more intuition because they realize that they need to make good decisions on a consistent basis. But in order for you to actually be able to access that bounty, you've got to be willing to challenge your existing paradigms and to be able to step beyond them. And so that healthy balance between being open-minded and being rigorous is incredibly valuable. And, there are many people, as part of their defense mechanism, they might consider themselves skeptical or just using common sense, whatever, but actually there's quite a lot of cynicism behind it. And that's a problem, because cynicism will basically lock you out from it. And actually, I don't know if you're aware of the term psychological reversal, where you can take a medicine. You can literally take a medicine that research has proven that it cures or significantly alleviates 80% of symptoms or whatever. But if you are in a state of psychological reversal, you can take the medicine all day and it doesn't do anything. And it's exactly the same with, these types of practices, energy medicine, anything. If you're determined for it not to work, guess what? It won't work. And Roald Dahl once said, those who don't believe in magic will never find it. So just open yourself up to the possibility of a little bit of magic, and that's all you need. You never know. 10 years later, you might realize that actually the world is just abundant in magic, and you spent the first half of your life not even realizing it.
Oh, Will, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and enjoy the rest of your retreat in Sussex.
Thank you so much. And thanks for great questions. And it'll be nice to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, we will, definitely. Bye, Will. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
You've been listening to The Psychedelic Couch. For more episodes, please follow me on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts, and find me on Instagram at The Psychedelic Couch and at Claire Faulkner Therapy, where I will be keeping you up to date on the latest episodes and information surrounding all things therapy, psychedelics, and expanded states.